At my retirement party, my son gave a speech thanking me for finally getting out of the way. I didn't argue. I just stood up, announced I sold the family business, and not to him. Hey there. We're working hard to hit our first 1,000 subscribers. If you love true, emotional stories, hit that subscribe button. It helps more than you know. Now let's get into the story. There's a moment in every man's life when the world splits into two. The life you thought you were living and the one you were actually living. For me, that moment came the night of my retirement party. A room packed with people I'd worked alongside for decades. Former employees, old friends, family members leaning into their plastic chairs, sipping cheap champagne. I should have been proud. I should have been at peace. Instead, I watched my only son, Jason, step up to the microphone, tap it twice like he owned the place, and say, "Finally, Dad's getting out of the way." The words dropped into the silence like a stone into a still lake. For a second, nobody knew whether to laugh or hold their breath. Some chuckled nervously. My wife, Helen, turned beet red and stared down at her lap. I just sat there, blinking slowly, feeling the air around me stretch tight like a rubber band about to snap. Jason wasn't even pretending anymore. In his eyes, I wasn't a father. I wasn't a mentor. I was a roadblock, an obstacle he could finally bulldoze. And the worst part? I wasn't even surprised. Somewhere deep down, I think I'd known for a long time that this moment would come. I'd just never had the stomach to admit it. Jason cleared his throat, flashed a fake grin, and kept going like he hadn't just slapped me across the face in front of 100 people. Seriously, though, Dad built something great. And now it's time for the next generation to take it to the next level. You all know me. I've got big plans. Big ideas. Dad's old school, you know? He built the house. I'm going to turn it into a skyscraper. He winked at the crowd like he'd just cracked the world's funniest joke. A few more laughs rippled around the room, but they sounded thinner now, more forced. Everyone could feel it, that sour undercurrent, that sharp, wrong note vibrating under Jason's words. The guy wasn't celebrating me. He was celebrating himself, celebrating the fact that, in his mind, the old king was finally stepping off the throne. I folded my hands in my lap, squeezing them so tightly my knuckles went white. I caught the eye of Paul Hartman, my oldest friend and the former COO of the company, standing in the back of the room. He gave me a slow, knowing nod, like he knew exactly what I was about to do. Because the truth was, Jason had no idea what was coming next. See, I hadn't spent the last 40 years breaking my back, missing birthdays, grinding through recessions just to hand everything over to a spoiled brat who thought he was entitled to it. Especially not after what I'd found out a few months earlier. Jason thought this was his coronation night. But really, it was his funeral. I rose from my chair slowly, feeling every eye in the room lock onto me. The old man. The stepping stone. The has-been finally getting out of the way. Jason stepped back from the mic, flashing that cocky grin again, and motioned for me to take his place. The look on his face, God, it was like he thought I was about to knight him or something. Pass the torch, bless his reign, validate his shiny little dream. I stepped up to the microphone, took a deep breath, looked out at the sea of faces, some curious, some uncomfortable, some already sensing that something wasn't quite right. And then, in the calmest voice I could manage, I said, "Thank you all for coming tonight. It means the world to see so many faces, old and new." Jason beamed like a kid on Christmas morning. "Tonight isn't just the celebration of an ending," I continued. "It's the celebration of a new beginning." Jason gave an exaggerated nod, urging the crowd along. I smiled. A real smile. The kind you smile when you know a secret that's about to change everything. Which is why I'm proud to announce that the family business has officially been sold. The room went dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Jason's smile froze on his face, still half hanging there like a mask that didn't fit anymore. "Sold?" he said, his voice cracking. "To who?" I leaned into the microphone, savoring the moment like the first sip of good whiskey after a long, hard day. "To a man who believes in hard work, in loyalty, in integrity, someone who knows what it means to build something with your own two hands." Jason's face drained of color. He opened his mouth, closed it again, opened it a second time. He looked like a fish gasping on dry land. Meanwhile, around the room, you could feel the energy shift. Curiosity sharpening into tension. Confusion curdling into dread. I straightened up. Effective immediately, I no longer own the company. Jason will not be assuming leadership. There will be no handover, no inheritance, no dynasty. I turned then, finally letting my eyes land squarely on my son. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The world doesn't owe you a thing, son. Neither do I. And just like that, 40 years of blood, sweat, and sacrifice were cut loose from the greedy hands that thought they were entitled to it. I left the microphone swinging gently in the air behind me, picked up my jacket from the back of my chair, and walked out of my own retirement party without looking back. Behind me, I could hear Jason shouting. I didn't bother to listen. The chapter was already closed. You might think a moment like that, dropping the bomb at your own retirement party, comes out of nowhere. Some angry old man snapping after one disrespect too many. But it's never just one thing. It's 1,000 little cuts over the years. Some you notice. Some you pretend not to notice because it hurts too much to admit what they mean. When Jason was born, I thought he was my second chance at life. I grew up dirt poor. First in my family to graduate high school. Built the company, Davidson Construction, from scratch with nothing but 2 credit cards, a rusted truck, and a whole lot of nights sleeping on site to make deadlines. I swore to myself my kid would never have to struggle like I did. He'd have the best schools, the best opportunities, the best life. And maybe that was my first mistake. Because what Jason learned wasn't gratitude. It was expectation. It wasn't look what dad made. It was look what I'm going to inherit. I saw the signs early. The way he talked to waiters when he thought I wasn't listening. The way he tossed out friends who couldn't keep up with his lifestyle. The way he scoffed at the old guys at the company, men who'd bled for our success long before he was even born. They're just placeholders, I heard him say once, laughing with one of his frat buddies at a backyard barbecue. Dead weight waiting to retire. Like my dad. It stung. But at the time, I brushed it off. He was young. Cocky. He'd grow out of it. Right? Except he didn't. He got older, but the entitlement just calcified. Every Thanksgiving dinner, every family trip, the conversation always twisted back to when I'm running things. Not if, when. And it wasn't just talk. 6 months before my retirement party, I caught him doing something that changed everything. I was reviewing some quarterly reports late one night. Helen was already asleep upstairs. I noticed a few weird entries. New consulting fees paid out to companies I didn't recognize. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Maybe some outsourced HR firm or marketing group I hadn't been looped in on. But when I dug deeper, I found Jason's fingerprints all over it. He'd been meeting secretly with outside investors, trying to broker a deal to sell parts of the company, bit by bit, without my knowledge, without my consent, without even a damn conversation, trying to carve up what I spent my whole life building like it was a Thanksgiving turkey. While I was still sitting at the head of the table, I sat there in my study until sunrise, staring at the spreadsheets, the emails, the contracts drafted behind my back. It wasn't just betrayal. It was greed, arrogance, the complete and utter certainty that he could do whatever he wanted and I'd just roll over and bless it. That was the night I decided. Jason would never, ever lay his hands on my company. But I wasn't going to shout, wasn't going to throw a fit, wasn't going to beg him to be someone he clearly wasn't. No, I was going to beat him the same way I built the business. Quietly, carefully, and absolutely. Because if Jason thought I was old and in the way, it was time to show him just how dangerous a man can be when he's got nothing left to lose. After that night in my study, something inside me shifted. I stopped looking at Jason like my son, started looking at him like a hostile force inside the walls. It's funny. You raise a kid thinking your job is to protect them from the world. You never imagine you'll have to protect the world from your kid. The next morning, I sat down at the kitchen table with a black coffee and a legal pad. Started writing down names. People I trusted. People who still believed in work, loyalty, honor. The kind of people who wouldn't gut Davidson Construction the first chance they got. At the top of the list was Paul Hartman. Paul had been with me since the early days. Slept in the same rusty trailers. Built the same walls with splintered hands. Even after retiring a few years back, he stayed a close friend. I called him that afternoon. We met at a diner outside town, somewhere nobody from the company ever went. Old wood booths, cracked leather seats, the smell of burnt bacon hanging in the air. Felt right. Felt honest. Paul sat across from me, leaning in, listening without saying a word as I laid it all out. Jason's secret deals. The fake consulting companies. The complete lack of respect. When I finished, Paul just leaned back, whistled low, and said, I always wondered if he had it in him. Guess you got your answer. He didn't try to soften it. Didn't tell me I was overreacting. Didn't make excuses for Jason. Instead, he said the words I didn't even know I was hoping to hear. You want to sell? I know a man who'd treat it right. His name was Marcus Vance. Former contractor turned investor. Built his own empire with calloused hands, not inheritance. He wasn't looking to strip the company for parts. He was looking to preserve it, keep the workers employed, the projects honest, the name proud. Over the next 3 months, we worked in secret. While Jason was busy throwing networking parties, pitching rebrand ideas to his frat buddies, and polishing his Vision 2030 speech, I was transferring assets, untangling ownership structures, filing the right paperwork in the right places. I hired a lawyer, a quiet, deadly smart one, to bulletproof every move. Every property deed, every operating agreement, every patent, everything locked down so tight, not even a whisper of a lawsuit would touch me later. And not once, did Jason notice. He was so busy planning the coronation, he didn't see the guillotine being built right behind him. Some nights, sitting in the study, I'd catch myself staring at the old company photo hanging on the wall. Me, 20 years younger, standing with the first crew. No suits, no fancy boardrooms. Just dirt under our nails and pride in our eyes. I wasn't doing this out of spite. I was doing it to protect the thing we built before it rotted completely. Before it became just another broken promise in Jason's trail of disasters. By the time the paperwork was finalized, the check signed, and the future secured, it was 2 weeks before the retirement party. 2 weeks before Jason's big moment. 2 weeks before he stepped up to that microphone and shoved the knife in my chest. Without realizing he was already bleeding out. The thing about betrayal is, it's not loud. Not at first. It's quiet. 1,000 missed opportunities for honesty, stacking up until they bury you alive. By the time Jason grabbed that microphone at the retirement party, by the time he called me dead weight, with that smug little grin, I was already standing on the other side of a line he didn't even know existed. He thought he was delivering the final blow. He didn't realize the war had already ended, and he lost. When I stood up after his speech, I could feel the weight of 100 eyes pinning me to the floor. People were leaning forward in their chairs. You could smell the tension, thick and metallic like blood in the air. I kept my voice calm, measured, respectful, even. Thank you all for coming tonight, I said. Truly, it's been a lifetime of hard work, and I'm grateful for every handshake, every deal, every rough day that turned into a better tomorrow. Jason was standing off to the side of the stage, chest puffed out, already rehearsing the moment in his head. The moment I was supposed to hand him the keys to the kingdom. I let the silence build, held it just long enough to make the room itch, then dropped the hammer. Which is why, after careful consideration, I've decided to sell Davidson Construction. The collective gasp that followed was almost musical. I could feel it hit Jason like a freight train, watch the color drain from his face. He stumbled forward, hand half raised like he could physically stop the words from reaching the crowd. Sold, he barked. You can't sell it. It's the family business. It's mine. I turned my head slowly, took him in like he was a stranger I barely recognized. And maybe, by then, he was. It was never yours, I said quietly. It was mine, built by my hands, my sweat, my sacrifices. I paused. Let it sink in. You don't inherit character, Jason. You earn it. The room went dead still. A few guests shifted uncomfortably. My wife Helen looked like she might be sick. Paul, standing at the back of the room, gave the smallest, proudest nod I had ever seen. Jason sputtered, tried to find words, but rage had scrambled his brain. He stormed up onto the stage, pointing a trembling finger in my face. You can't do this. You owe me. This was supposed to be mine. You promised. I stepped back from the microphone, took my time, studied his face, the panic, the fury, the utter disbelief. You're right about one thing, I said finally. I made a promise. To protect Davidson Construction from anyone who would tear it apart for their own ego. I leaned in, voice low enough only he could hear the next part. Even if that someone was you. Jason snapped. Right there, in front of everyone. He shoved the microphone stand so hard it toppled over with a screech. Shouted words I won't repeat. Words that stripped away whatever thin veil of respect he had left. Some of the guests started gathering their coats. Others just stared, wide-eyed, frozen in disbelief. Helen rushed up, grabbing Jason's arm, trying to haul him back, whispering frantically in his ear. But he shook her off like a petulant child. Threw open the exit doors so hard they slammed against the walls. Stormed out into the night without a backward glance. For a long moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Finally, I turned back to the remaining crowd. Smiled, polite and worn thin. "Thank you all for coming," I said. "Drive safe." And just like that, after 40 years of blood and sweat, after decades of dreams and battles and small wins that added up to a lifetime, I walked away from Davidson Construction on my own terms. Not because I was forced out, not because I was too old, but because sometimes the only way to save what you love is to burn the bridge to the people who would destroy it. You'd think after a public meltdown like that, Jason would have crawled away to lick his wounds. Take the loss. Rebuild his dignity, maybe. But no. Jason had inherited at least one thing from me: stubbornness. Unfortunately, none of the wisdom that was supposed to come with it. 2 days after the party, I got the first call. It was from my lawyer, early morning, just as the sun was cracking over the trees outside my window. He sounded almost amused. "Jason's lawyer just filed an injunction," he said. "They're claiming you were coerced into selling the company, that you're mentally unfit." I sat there at the kitchen table, staring at my coffee, feeling something inside me go stone cold. Not sadness, not anger, just a kind of tiredness that felt deeper than bone. My own son, my flesh and blood, trying to paint me as senile to claw back what he thought was rightfully his. It would have been laughable if it wasn't so pitiful. Because what Jason didn't know, and what his fancy downtown lawyer clearly hadn't told him, was that I'd been preparing for this exact moment for nearly 2 years. I had medical records, psych evaluations, cognitive tests signed by some of the best doctors in the state, attesting to my full mental competency, dated and notarized, filed quietly in sealed envelopes long before Jason ever thought to challenge me. I wasn't some doddering old fool stumbling out of the spotlight. I was a man who had spent a lifetime building fortresses, not fairy tales. My lawyer filed a countersuit within 48 hours. Motion to dismiss. Motion for sanctions. Motion to recoup legal fees. Jason's case didn't just get thrown out. It got laughed out of court. And when the dust settled, when the final paperwork was stamped and sealed, Jason was left holding nothing but a stack of bills he couldn't pay. Because here's the second thing he didn't know. The moment the sale to Marcus finalized, every single financial tie between Jason and the company had been severed. No shares, no voting rights, no trust funds, nothing. Even the car he was driving, a sleek black BMW he liked to flash around town, had been leased under the company's name. And Marcus didn't see any reason to keep paying for it. One afternoon, Jason came storming into my driveway, furious, demanding I fix it. Still somehow thinking I owed him. Still believing, even now, that he could bully or guilt or shame me into rolling over. He stood there, fists balled at his sides, shouting about betrayal, about bloodlines, about legacy. I let him finish. Watched the last of the fire drain out of him as he realized the words weren't landing anywhere anymore. Then I said the last thing I would ever say to him. "You're not my legacy, Jason. The men who worked beside me, the homes we built, the lives we touched, that's my legacy. You chose your path. Now walk it." I didn't slam the door in his face. Didn't scream. Didn't rage. I just turned around, walked back into my house, and left him standing there on the cracked concrete. A king without a kingdom. A boy who never learned the weight of a crown. That was the last time we spoke. It's strange. You spend your whole life building something you think is permanent. A family, a legacy, a story worth telling. And then one day, you realize permanence is just a story we tell ourselves to sleep at night. The truth is, everything changes. Everything ends. Whether you're ready or not. After Jason stormed out of my life for the last time, things got quieter. Simpler. I sold the big house a few months later. Helen and I talked about it for a long time, sitting on the back porch over coffee, listening to the cicadas. We both knew the house was too big now. Too many empty rooms. Too many echoes. We found a small cottage by a lake about an hour outside the city. 2 bedrooms, a wide porch, a crooked old oak tree that leans just enough to make you nervous during storms. It's perfect. I spent my mornings fishing, my afternoons reading, my evenings walking the dog along the shore. No board meetings. No quarterly reports. No tension hanging in the air like a storm waiting to break. Helen smiled more, laughed easier, started painting again, something she hadn't done since before Jason was born. And me? I finally breathed. Really breathed. People from the old company still call sometimes, just to check in. Tell me about a project going up in a new neighborhood, a family moving into their first home, a kid who sent a letter thanking Davidson Construction for building the baseball field they love. Marcus kept his word. He treated the business like a living thing, not a machine to be gutted. Every time I hear a good story from the old crew, it reminds me, I made the right call. As for Jason, last I heard, he tried to start his own consulting firm. It lasted about 6 months. Burned through investors, burned through friends, burned through every bridge he hadn't already torched. Word gets around faster than ambition can run. Nobody wanted to work with a man whose only skill was entitlement. I don't hate him. I don't wish him harm. But I don't miss him either. There's a kind of grief you can live with. Not the hot, tearing kind that guts you from the inside out. The quieter kind, like a slow tide pulling back from the shore, leaving only wet sand behind. A memory. A reminder. Sometimes, when the sunset turns the lake gold and the cicadas start their slow evening song, I sit on the porch and think about the business. About the young man I used to be, standing in front of that first half-built house, dreaming of a future bigger than I could hold in my hands. And I smile, because I kept the promise that mattered most. Not to Jason, not even to the company, but to myself. The promise that I would build something worth building, and protect it, even if it meant standing alone. Because in the end, family isn't blood. It's loyalty. It's honor. It's knowing when to let the rotten branches fall, so the whole tree can survive. And that's the story. If you're still here, that means you're one of us. So go ahead, hit that subscribe button. I drop new chaos every single day, and trust me, tomorrow's story, it's even worse than this one.